House and the Senate right now, Senator Sanders. What do you think is going to happen?
Well,
you have this enormous rush.
I don't know. I have not been, to tell you the truth, overly happy by some of the responses that I'm hearing. I think we have to start off with the premise that the Bush administration has been the most incompetent administration, certainly in modern history. They've been incredibly dishonest. They've been very political. And I think if anyone forgets about the fact that there's an election in 6 weeks, I think one would be very, very naive. So I think the Democrats have got to stand very tall, and I think on everything that I've told you about who should pay for this bailout, I think you're going to have overwhelming support from the American people. The American people understand that under Bush, they have been ripped off. Their standard of living is declining, while the people on top have made out like bandits. And now is the time to say, sorry, we're not going to pick up. The damage done by these folks.
Senator Sanders, what does this mean for the presidential race? How is this political?
Well, they're going to be, believe me, they're going to be spinning every other minute. Right now, as you know, John McCain, who is I hope all listeners know, is very close to Phil Gramm, and one can argue that Phil Gramm was the leading exponent. He was the chairman of the Senate Banking Committee, the leading exponent of deregulation. He is the guy who got the so-called Enron loophole through. He is the guy who certainly led the effort for deregulation in financial services. He was McCain's key economic advisor, and there was some talk that he would be Secretary of the Treasury under a McCain administration. Now, of course, that was yesterday, and now we find McCain, the great trust buster, the great fighter for regulation, the guy who's going to take on Wall Street. And that's what Karl Rove and the Republicans do very well. They assume that the American people don't remember yesterday, and you just start off, with today. I hope that the Democrats do a good job in exposing that. I think Obama is getting that word out. I think the message for this campaign is that we have had 8 years of right-wing extremist ideology. We have given incredible tax breaks to the very wealthiest people who don't need it. We have worked aggressively, and Bush and McCain are working on it today, for unfettered free trade, which has meant the loss of millions of good-paying jobs. We have done an enormous amount of deregulation so that you can end up in the situation we're in today. And that's obviously McCain's philosophy. And if the American people understand that, and they understand what a disaster Bush's policies have been, it would seem to me that Obama should win with a very comfortable vote.
One of the other things that the administration has done is it's now extending insurance to money market funds of Wall Street firms, especially in retirement accounts, when previously the government was only insuring bank deposits. Do you support this as well?
Well, do I support what the Bush administration is proposing? No, I don't. There's going to be a lot of work that has to be done in a very short while. I am certainly not going to be supporting anything close to what the Bush administration has brought down. Amy, with that, I'm afraid I'm going to have to run.
Well, I thank you for being with us.
My pleasure.
Independent Senator of Vermont Bernie Sanders will be one of those voting on this legislation. Robert Scheer, I want to go back to you. What does this mean for the future of American capitalism?
Well, I think Senator Sanders made a very important point. Barack Obama, back in March at Cooper Union, Robert Rubin, who's now unfortunately close to the campaign, in January of this year, he's the guy who in the Clinton administration pushed through the Financial Services Modernization Act, allowing this madness. But in January, he said, we don't have a problem. This is just a normal fluctuation of the market. That was in a speech he gave at Cooper Union. However, in March, Barack Obama gave a very good speech on the economy. He said much of what we have been saying on the show so far. Unfortunately, he lost that voice temporarily, and these people like Summers and Rubin moved over to his campaign. So I think if Barack Obama can recover his populist voice that got him where he so far in the primaries, I think this should be a runaway. I mean, it's unbelievable that the American people would want 4 more years of this madness. I would point out, you've asked a question about covering foreign banks. One of those foreign banks, UBS, Swiss base, is where Phil Gramm works. He was rewarded after being head of the banking committee, pushing through this deregulation. His wife, Wendy Graham, went to work for Enron, was on their audit committee. She's runs a big institute for deregulation that the big corporations put a lot of money into. Phil Graham went to work for UBS, a foreign-based banking conglomerate, and now they want to extend this coverage to those banks. These people have no shame. I think it's time, as I said before, to really talk about criminal investigation. They have defrauded the American people, and they changed the laws. You know, the old folk song, Woody Guthrie, I guess. You know, some will rob you with a gun, and others with a fountain pen. I mean, imagine these people came in, rewrote federal regulation to exempt the kind of credit swaps. I know people find this a bit confusing, but I'm saying they got to read up on it. The hybrid instruments that they talk about, that's what allowed all of this. That's why AIG got in trouble. They're supposed to be selling insurance. They're not supposed to be backing security packages. And all of this stuff was hidden. It was murky. The bankers themselves admit they don't know what was going on. And all of that was made legal. It was illegal up until, less than 10 years ago. It was made legal by acts of Congress led by the Republicans. And unfortunately, a majority of Democrats backed it. And Bill Clinton signed off on that first major legislation. So we have to be very wary. Yeah.
Well, Bob Scheer, the amazing irony now is, as we read in some of the papers today, that the very firms that were involved in creating this crisis are now lining up in Washington to be able to become managers in case the federal government buys up this debt, and then it needs to manage how it will get rid of the debt, so that the very firms are now lining up to become the money managers of the distressed debt that the government buys.
Right. What you've got here is really the end of the Reagan Revolution. And I hate to bring up the bad F word, but, there is a model for this, and Mussolini had it in Italy, and it's called fascism. It's where your big corporate interests throw in with government, destroy the freedom of the rest of the people, and preserve their power. Everybody forgets private corporations and banks did quite well, made out quite well in Italy and Germany in those days, And I am really worried about this assault on our democracy. The idea, we didn't cover insurance, as Sanders pointed out, insurance for 4 million kids, because Bush vetoed it and said $7 billion was too much to spend to cover insurance, health insurance for 4 million kids. But now they can throw $700 billion at these banks, and they say we can't even have hearings about it. It is absolutely outrageous, and I don't want to lose that point I made earlier. The best way to deal with this crisis now is to put a freeze on foreclosures. That's what the Democrats should be. It's what Hillary mentioned during the primaries. I don't know if she did it just as a one-liner, but the fact is it's a very reasonable thing to do. Say American homeowners should not suffer now. If people were given these mortgages, and by the way, it's not just the subprime mortgage holders that hurt. If the housing market collapses as it has, it hurts everyone. Why not a freeze on foreclosures? And why are the Democrats not pushing that idea? Let's help out the people who are suffering, and the working people, middle-class people, poor people who have these homes. It's their whole asset, instead of worrying about saving Goldman Sachs and saving Citigroup. And it's amazing to me that a guy like Paulson could have been head of Goldman Sachs. He knew this was all going on. Robert Rubin was head of Goldman Sachs. They go into the government, and now they're going to bail out their former companies, and we have to pay for it. I mean, it's outrageous.
Dean Baker, you're the head of Center for Economic and Policy Research. It's based in Washington, D.C. The climate right now, I mean, watching the Sunday talk shows, there was this clear sense that if this is not accomplished in the next few days, that it's like before the invasion of Iraq. We can be hit by a weapon of mass destruction is basically the idea. And this is about not saving Wall Street, but saving the American people. That was the message that was put out immediately yesterday.
Well, I want to walk a line here. I mean, there is a point. The system of payments stopped working last week. If that happened, we would have to, go to buy our groceries with gold. We had a serious situation. Now, on the other hand, the Fed and Treasury were able to deal with it. They are able to deal with it. They have the resources to deal with that. But it is a very serious situation. So they aren't talking about total nonsense in that. Now, they're trying to scare Congress to death because it's not as though we have to do it today or tomorrow. And, what I would say is is we do have to keep the system operating, but it should be
They're
punitive.
saying by
I keep
Thursday or
emphasizing
Friday.
Punitive.
They're saying by Thursday or Friday.
We could probably wait a week. We could probably wait 2 weeks. But the point is, it could be punitive. It should be punitive. That is the whole point. If UBS wants to come here and sell 90% of their company to us, to sell their junk, fine. And their CEOs are going to get a 90 or 95% pay cut, fine. It's got to be punitive. I don't care if the whole world wants to sell their financial system to us. That's fine. We can structure this. We should structure it in a way that keeps the system operating and is punitive so that UBS is not happy to have to come here. That can be done, and that's what should be the focus. I should also say progressives have an unbelievable opportunity here. The people hate Wall Street now. They see that you have the highest paid people in the country that ruin their companies, ruin the economy, and now they're asking for a handout. We have a chance to turn around the inequality that's been built up over the last 30 years by hitting it right at the top if we focus in the right direction. We can do this. They have to have that bailout. They do need it. We have time, and we can impose the conditions that ensure that the people who got us here get punished.
On that note, I want to thank you both for being with us. Of course, we will continue to cover this. Dean Baker with the Center for Economic and Policy Research, Robert Scheer, veteran journalist, columnist, editor at the political website truthdig.com. This is Democracy Now! When we come back, waiting for an ordinary day in Iraq, the unraveling of life there. Stay with us.